I'm going to teach how to do an EFT tapping technique called chasing the pain. And for this video, I'm going to assume that you already have an understanding of how to work with the basic EFT tapping process. So if you do run across anything in this video that is not familiar to you already, you can always refer back to my video on that and just check that out to get up to speed. So just like with the basic EFT tapping process, chasing the pain is going to start with some mindfulness and checking in. And chasing the pain, although it refers to pain, it can be used with any number of physical symptoms. So things like a queasy stomach can also be used on, and things like numbness or tingling, you can try it with that as well. So the first thing we're going to do is just check in and qualify and quantify what the physical symptom you're experiencing feels like. So I'll use an example of my shoulder, which has a little bit of tension and some pain. And so you can kind of follow along with how I work through that. So we're going to start by qualifying the physical symptom. And so that includes a description of whatever you're feeling. So if it's pain, you'll want to qualify whether it's like a shooting pain, a stabbing pain, if it's a dull ache, if it's some kind of sharp pain, or maybe it feels like it's burning or tingling, something like that. So any word that comes to mind for a description of that feeling. You can also use things like colors, sounds, smells, different images. Maybe there's densities or shapes or colors or things like that that you associate with the physical symptoms. So you can kind of tune in and notice what comes up to describe it for you. So we'll start by doing that. So for example, I'm feeling this issue in my shoulder is feeling kind of like some tension and maybe like things are slightly out of place. That's kind of what I would use to describe it. And the color I'm associating with it is kind of a blue sort of color. So we're also going to want to quantify that. And the easiest way to do that is to use a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is you're not feeling it at all, and 10 is it's about as bad as you can imagine. So just check in with that and see how strongly you're feeling that physical symptom. So for my example, I'm feeling it probably about a 2, so it's not very strong for me at all. I've already done some tapping on it today. Alright, so our next step is going to be to create a setup statement and a reminder phrase. So again, really similar to the basic process. And for that reminder phrase, you can use basically anything that's going to remind you of the physical symptom. So you can go really simple, like I could say this pain or this tension in my shoulder, and keep it really simple like that. Or you could also throw in all those qualifiers, those descriptive terms that make you think of that physical symptom or that you associate with that. So that's kind of a personal preference thing, and you can go either way basically. So for the sake of my example, I'm going to use this pain in my shoulder, and that's going to be my reminder phrase. And then my setup statement is going to be pretty simple too. It's going to be, even though I have this pain in my shoulder, I love and accept myself. So again, pretty simple, pretty easy, and you can make that more wordy if you like to. So our next step is going to be to do tapping on the side of the hand point while we repeat that setup statement 3 times. So in my example, I'm going to go, even though I've got this pain in my shoulder, I love and accept myself. Even though I've got this pain in my shoulder, I love and accept myself. Even though I've got this pain in my shoulder, I love and accept myself. Alright, and then step 4 is to tap through all of the other tapping points about 2 to 3 times. And we're going to repeat that reminder phrase as we go through those. And again, here you can use just the same thing from the setup statement, that one word phrase basically again. Or you can get a little more descriptive using all your different qualifying terms. It's really up to you. So start with the top of the head. I have this pain in my shoulder. And the eyebrow. This pain in my shoulder. 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 this pain in my shoulder, this pain in my shoulder, this pain in my shoulder. I have this pain in my shoulder, this tension in my shoulder, this feeling like something's not quite in the right place. And it's kind of associated with a bluish color. This pain in my shoulder, this tension, this feeling like something's not quite in the right place. And kind of associated with a bluish color. Alright, and then after tapping through those points 2 to 3 times, basically we're going to follow the exact same process again. So what we're going to do is check in on the physical symptom. So you'll want to do those same steps again with qualifying and quantifying the physical symptom. So sometimes you'll notice that, where it is has actually changed. Like in some cases it might have moved from my shoulder maybe to the other side or into my head or things like that. In my case today it didn't really move, but it did change a little bit. Actually, now that I say that, it did kind of move. It moved from here over to here, so it moved a little bit. So basically, if you notice it moving, treat it as an entirely new physical symptom. And that's where the kind of chasing the pain comes in, is you're kind of like following it. And the idea is that eventually it will either decrease to 0 or become manageable and, not interfere with your life in any way. So I'm going to check in. I still have that same kind of tension feeling. I'm not noticing as much of that feeling like something's out of place or not in the right place. So that's maybe down to a 1, that feeling of something not being in the right place. And then the actual tension kind of shifted over a little bit. So it's not really the exact same as it was before. So yeah, if you've noticed something like what I've noticed where it just feels a little bit different than before, you can go ahead and repeat the process with whatever's there for you now. And you might notice things like maybe it's not associated with the same color anymore, or maybe there's a different density or image or sound associated with it than what you had before. So those can be powerful things to work with. You might have also noticed that you don't feel anything anymore, which is awesome. That's always our number 1 goal. So congratulations. Yeah, and if it moved, again, just treat it like something totally brand new. So we're going to repeat those same steps. We already started with our check-in. I kind of described to you what I'm feeling there, and with the quantifying, I felt like a 1 and then a 2, but in a different spot. And yeah, now it's associated with kind of a slightly lighter blue color than what it was before. So I can again use kind of a similar reminder phrase if I want to this time, because it's very similar in my case. If it's different in yours, like if it's in a totally different place, you can make it appropriate to what you're feeling. Or, if some of the qualities associated with the change, you can always work those in. So in my example, I'm going to use this tension in my shoulders, actually what I'm going to call it now. But I could still use this pain in my shoulder. That would be fine too. And then my setup statement's going to be almost the exact same as before too. So it'll be, even though I've got this tension in my shoulder, I love and accept myself. Alright, so then we go ahead and tap on the side of the hand point while we repeat that setup statement 3 times. So even though I've got this tension in my shoulder, I love and accept myself. Even though I've got this tension in my shoulder, I love and accept myself. Even though I've got this tension in my shoulder, I love and accept myself. And then we're going to tap through all the other points while repeating that reminder phrase 2 to 3 times. I've got this tension in my shoulder. I've got this tension in my shoulder. 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 this tension in my shoulder, this tension in my shoulder, this tension in my shoulder, this tension in my shoulder. All right, and now I can basically repeat those steps again. So I'm going to check in again. And I'm actually noticing that that feeling of something being out of place is at a 0 now, and there's a little bit of tension that's shifted slightly more into my chest rather than my shoulder. So I could continue with that if I wanted to. In my case, it's not really affecting my life or causing me any discomfort that is significant, so I'm just going to keep doing my physio exercises every day. But yeah, depending on where you end up, you might do a little more tapping and chasing the pain, or you might decide like, okay, well, it went from a 10 down to like a 3, so that's pretty good. That's pretty manageable. So that's kind of the basic idea with chasing the pain. And if you try it a couple of rounds, you should get an idea of whether you're actually going to have any kind of luck with working with your physical symptoms with that technique. Sometimes too, with this technique, as with the basic process, is if you hadn't been focusing on the physical symptom beforehand, sometimes when you first tune into it, you'll kind of notice it a little bit stronger than before. Typically, if you do a little more tapping, it'll actually decrease again. That almost always happens. If for some reason that doesn't work, you can also try, distracting yourself from that physical symptom again. Sometimes that works really well too. So that's another way to deal with it. Another possibility is sometimes physical symptoms respond better to dealing with the emotions that can be associated with them, and that can be quite lengthy, and there's a lot of different facets and aspects to that, so that's really outside of the scope of this video. I might do more in the future where I talk about some of the different ways we can work with the emotions that are associated with physical symptoms. I've gotten really great results actually from just working on the emotions, and then I all of a sudden noticed that a physical symptom was totally gone when I hadn't even been focusing on it. So there definitely is a correlation, and I've seen it in myself for sure. And that's another way you can work with physical symptoms too. But the chasing the pain method is really kind of like the basic way to work with physical symptoms with EFT tapping. So if you have any questions about the method or about EFT tapping in general, feel free to write them in the comments. I love to help teach people about tapping and how to use this awesome technique.